What's up, guys? Happy Friday night. You know what night it is. It is cards and cake. And I'm back with my classic 2 slices of double chocolate cake from Sweet Lady Jane here in Los Angeles. And we have a very special guest joining us tonight. He is a seasoned collector of 40 years, which is 6 years older than me. He's been in this hobby for so long. He knows so much about it, but he also has a thriving YouTube station and podcast where he brings on guests. Some of them are the top representatives of the different companies in this hobby, as well as content creators. So he really is, he has his finger on the pulse of the hobby and gets to see exactly what's going on behind the scenes. And with these interviews, he really knows so much more about me and then probably you guys as well. So we are in for a treat. But before I start that, I want to say hi to you guys. And Josh, we definitely have some hockey fans. Jeremy, my guest from Sports Card Live, is a huge hockey fan. Cody, yes, sir, you're right on that. I can't wait for the Bucks game as well. What's up, Michael Ham? You got the popcorn. I got the cake. And I want to show you something before I bring Jeremy on as well, because, dude, I just hope it's a good game. But obviously the Bucks, that's who I'm rooting for. But I got a special envelope in the mail, a special package, and I was going through all these packages today to do my next mail day or mail week video. So I had about 15 packages, all filled with graded cards, no more raw cards. But I got this special package here. And it was this little letter right here. It says, "Comeback Card Investor" in it. And then on the back, it said something weird. It said, "One thing I've noticed is every time I watch your videos, it seems like the water bottles and jugs keep getting bigger or you're getting smaller." And I don't know what that part is about, but it was a really cool note. And inside of here, it says, "Just thought I would toss in a few treats for you. Some Bucks greats and not so greats, and a big bad Eddie M.F.ing Murray, as he's named in the card collecting. It's just a badass pick. Keep real and chill, Eric." So Eric Johnson, I appreciate everything you've sent me. You sent me all these Buccaneer cards here. Some of them, like Josh Freeman, who was supposed to be our franchise quarterback, who did not pan out. Vinny Testaverde. Let's see, Vinny Testaverde there. And then we got a couple more. But my favorite of these, Mike Allstott, the A-Train. If you remember him, rumbling, fumbling, bumbling, he would break like 19 tackles for a 4-yard gain. So I appreciate that. This is a number to 897 prominence, Mike Allstott. And I thought that was it. He included a couple other baseball cards. Will Clark, who I guess if you're a baseball fan, you might know who he is from the 80s. Let's see there. Hopefully it focuses. Will Clark. All right, well, it's not going to focus, but he looks like he's going to jack someone up with his bat. And then this dude right here, look at this giant card. I thought it said Eddie Murphy because I was like, who? I didn't know Eddie Murphy played baseball, but that is some wicked facial hair right there. So I appreciate that. And this is what I really wanted to show you. So I feel honored to have my very own one-of-one Marvel insert, kind of. This is me. This is the Comeback Card Investor. Hopefully I can get closer and you guys can see it with my bike accidents right there. And Eric, I appreciate this drawing. You actually made me look a lot leaner than I actually am. And since COVID happened, I've gained like 10 pounds of fat and lost 10 pounds of muscle. But this is super back. As one of my favorite YouTubers, I draw a card of the person's PC players, but I thought I would just pick this famous subject. You have a great personality, and it's one of the main reasons I watch. Keep it up, Eric. So super cool. This is definitely my favorite card in my PC right now, my bike accident that I'll remember forever. But without further ado, I want to bring on our guest. This is Jeremy from Sports Card Live. You probably know who he is already, but again, he's been in the hobby for 40 years. He knows a whole lot about the collecting side and knows a lot about what's going on in the hobby from all the interviews he does on his YouTube station. So Jeremy, welcome, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Brad. Thanks for having me on the show.
For sure, man. What'd you think of that drawing that Eric did?
The guy's got some skills for sure. I love the detail. It looks like it hurt, though. I got to tell you that.
You know what? It hurt like hell, but now after seeing this, it's totally worth it. So I thought it was really cool. But also, I got to say, there's other people out there. Costa Rica Card Collector is one who's doing designs of personalized cards. So like putting people in a Donruss rated rookie or a Prism card. And I think if you're an artist out there, there's a lot of potential in this hobby if you want to make custom either cards or paintings of cards. Because with more people working at home, I think that that's a great little side hustle, because we could all use some swag on our walls. But dude, let's start off with this. You're one of the few hockey fans that I know of here in the collecting world. And I know there's a lot of Canadians in hockey, but some of the guys I know, it's only basketball, it's only football. So what are you seeing so far in hockey? Because I'm loving my Lightning so far, but I at least wanted to touch on a bit of hockey before we dive in.
I'm just glad that we have a season that they, they managed to figure it out. And, we've got like 7 teams in Canada, 25, 24 in the US. So I'm just glad that they were able to figure out a way to align the league so that we didn't have to worry about border crossings. And it's on. Hockey's on. That's, it's like when basketball came back. We need this. We as a society, we need these sports because it gives us entertainment, gives us something to get excited about during the pandemic. So I'm glad it's on. It's exciting. My team's playing. I'm a Calgary Flames fan. We're doing all right so far. I know the Lightning are doing well too. So I'm just glad hockey's back, man.
Me too. And I still say this: if you're not a hockey fan, give it a shot, because I don't know a sport that's more fun to watch on TV, but definitely not in person. In person, it is a blast. So when we're allowed to go back in, I think it's way more fun than football, because the seats, the stadium's a lot closer. There's only 20,000 or so in an arena, and it's a lot more physical and busier than basketball. So it is just nonstop action. You hear every check, you see fights. And like I told you, in basketball, you could flail to the ground and they call a foul. In hockey, the ref only gets involved when the fight is boring, when they're just like hugging each other. But besides that, if they're knocking the crap out of each other, then they just let them go. And I thought that was the coolest thing. So who do you have to win it all?
The Colorado Avalanche, man. I'm picking them to win it all this year. Nathan MacKinnon, he's their leader. He's probably, second best player in the NHL. A lot of people would argue the best behind Connor McDavid, but I think Nathan MacKinnon is the real deal, and they got a solid team. So I'm picking them to win the Stanley Cup this year. It's always hard to pick the winner, though, in hockey, because things happen. 2 years ago, Brad, you'll remember your Tampa Bay Lightning. They led the league in standings for the season by a wide margin ahead of second place, but then they got swept in the first round of the playoffs by the Columbus Blue Jackets, and we're done. No, I picked them to win the Stanley Cup that year. They didn't win a single game in the playoffs, so it's hard. Hockey's hard to pick.
I think every sport is hard in that way, because we don't know injuries and whatnot. I would say football would be harder because it comes down to one game. I would imagine one game where one pass interference call that's not called, one interception, one missed field goal. There's a lot of dynamics in a football game, but it really is who shows up better that one day versus over a 7-game series. So
Definitely.
Dude, I have to go with my Lightning. The only concern I have is, do they care enough? Do they care enough a couple months after winning? But like you said, if you watch sports and you watch hockey, it was the Lightning who won. I think they set the record for the most wins in regulation in the regular season, tied with maybe Detroit or something from 20 years ago. And they got swept in the first round. 4 games, like if you put money on Columbus to win that series, you probably would have made a fortune, because the Lightning steamrolled everyone. And then, it comes down to, it doesn't matter what happens in the regular season. It's always about the playoffs. I think the same goes with football as well. And there's some big games this weekend where usually the team that is hot going in does a lot better than the team with a better record throughout, but is cooling off. So regardless, without COVID, we need sports. With COVID, we need sports even more, because we need that escapism more than ever. But let's go into your backstory, because you have been in this hobby for 40 years, which is roughly 40 times how long I've been in it, except for when I was a kid. So where did it all begin for you?
It started, you know what, man, is like, I'm born in the early 70s. So it started in the very late 70s when I was like, I don't know, 7, 8 years old. and I'm at my cousin's house, and I got 3 cousins. They're all guys, and one of them is a couple years older than me, and he had a bunch of hockey cards on his bedroom floor. And I just picked them up and started looking at them, thought these are pretty awesome. Looked at the back, enjoyed the stats. And I was hooked from that moment on. Bought packs of hockey cards, baseball cards, basketball cards, all through the 80s, completed sets. I was opening packs of 1980 Topps basketball in the day, the Magic Johnson, Larry Bird rookie card. For 25 cents a pack or whatever they were, I was opening them in those days. So, and then I never stopped, man. In the early 90s, I opened up a card shop had that from 91 till 94 in that original junk wax era. You know, in university, college in the 90s, I never got out of the hobby, but I slowed down for a few years. And then I really picked up again strong right around 2000. And I haven't looked back. It's been a major part of my life now, my whole life, but really the last 20 years. It's funny, I say the last 20 years, but then again, in the early 90s, I had a shop. In the 80s, all I thought about was hockey cards and completing my set every year, going to the 7-Eleven and buying packs, or the drugstore or wherever it was, buying packs to fill in my set. So I've done it my whole life, and I've been pretty active in the community as well.
Where are all your cards? Do you have like a warehouse? Like how many cards would you say you have now? Or has it been more of like I buy a lot, I sell a lot, and it's very liquid like that?
I've got my personal collection, and then I've got my inventory. So I buy and sell collections all the time. I set up at card shows, I buy locally, and I'll buy a collection, whatever. I'll take all of it. You know, I'll pick out a few pieces for my personal collection, and then the rest I will find a way to get rid of. So that stuff is, you know, I keep these two things quite separate because I don't want to confuse them. My personal collection is very personal to me. My personal collection is probably like, you know, I've got cards and binders that I don't count them, but I probably got about 3,000 cards that are like worthy of me listing and tracking and scanning and knowing I have, and, you know, for insurance and estate purposes. I'd say I have 3,000 cards that I really care about, and then maybe another, I don't know, 1,000, 1,500 that are just kind of fun cards that, you know, aren't worth anything really, maybe up to $1 or $2, but I still enjoy them.
So in your PC, what are some of the cards that just hit you the hardest? Like you would never get rid of them, or they just mean so much from an emotional standpoint, nostalgic, whatever it is. What are some of those cards?
Oh man, I've got lots of cards, and I've got lots of good cards because I've been doing it. Like I've been collecting Hall of Fame rookies since the late 80s, and I've gone pretty hard. So I mean, I've got a Honus Wagner 1910 card, an American Caramel card that's pretty cool. Just to talk baseball, I've got all the, like, you know, you talk about the Mount Rushmore. I've got pretty much all the Mount Rushmore cards from all the sports. I'm only missing, like, I don't have a George Mikan, I don't have a Bronco Nagurski, and I don't have a Honus Wagner. But I pretty much have all the rest of them, or a really good substitute. Like I don't own a 52 Topps Mickey Mantle, but I own a 51 Bowman Mickey Mantle, which is the actual rookie card. So to me, I've always been a rookie card collector. I collect more than just rookies, but that's kind of been one kind of common thread. So that card, I have one of the nicest Bobby Orr rookies in the world. It's a PSA 8. I've got a Michael Jordan Jambalaya and a BGS 9.5 that I absolutely love. And I bought my PSA 9 Michael Jordan rookie in 2008 for $900 or $1,000, and now one just sold for like 48 grand the other day. So I could keep going though. I've got about 100 cards that are all of significant value, I would say.
Well, have you ever thought, like, you know, man, the price is getting really high. I think I could sell now and then put that money into something else? Or is it just like, you know what, I'm going to take this to my grave, or I'm going to pass this down to my kids? Or is it something like that?
I mean, if I were to, I think about it. I think, wow, I could sell this card for 50 grand and profit $48,000. What am I going to do with that money? I'm going to want to buy more cards. So the answer is, it's a quick no. I'm not interested in selling anything I have. I'm a believer in this hobby. I have been my whole life. I've never been disappointed by the hobby. So, you know, someone with my longevity of experience, you know, something that I can share with some viewers or in your audience who may not have been in the hobby as long as me, or new to the hobby, you know, if you buy a card and you see that it goes down in value soon, like a card of a Hall of Famer, a really good rookie card of somebody, like I'll give you an example. Back in 2016, I bought some baseball rookies, Hall of Fame rookies, and I bought them at a peak. And then the hobby retracted a little bit in late 16, early 17. So these cards went down in value. A card I paid probably $2,600 went down to being worth a Nolan Ryan rookie in a PSA 7. I think I paid like $2,200. You know,
what year is this?
It's a 68 Nolan Ryan rookie.
When did you buy it though for 2,200?
2016.
Wow. Okay.
It was a PSA 7, a nice PSA 7. Well, within like a year, that card was trading sometimes for under $1,000. And I thought to myself, well, that sucks. I wish I would have waited to buy it or bought it earlier. But I knew if I'm patient, it's going to come back. And now I'm back in the black on it. So that's one of very few examples where I've seen that kind of a drop and then a bounce back. My message though is if you buy a card and then the market comes down a little bit, don't feel like you've lost and you got to sell. And because now it's going to be a race to the bottom, everyone's going to sell supplies. You're better off to hold on, let the market come back, because over my time in the hobby, the market has always come back. Just look at where we are now. And I know 2020 was a crazy year, but I feel like if card values come down from where they are right now, and I know a lot of people are calling for that eventually, I'll be okay with it. I'm not going to be like, oh, I should have sold. I'll be like, okay, that's all right. This is typical. This is natural. The market's come down a bit, but I'm going to be patient enough to wait 1 to 10 more years. And let's see where the hobby is at. What's the market out there? I don't like to time the market. It's just not my jam. But I'm a long-term hold guy, especially when it comes to my investment pieces and my personal collection pieces. I'm a long-term hold guy. But if I buy a collection with the intention to flip it and pay for my trip to card shows and that, then it's short term and I just want to move it and make some profit to buy more cards.
Yeah, you mentioned something really important, which is you've been in it for 40 years. So your perspective of the hobby is huge, right? It's 40 years long. For myself, a couple of years as a kid, but really it's 11 months, 12 months of this era of sports cards. And I have to remind myself that this has been going on for 100 years, 1910, so 100 plus years. The hobby goes through the ebbs and flows, but there's always collectors. There's always people interested, whether there's a lot or just a smaller number. But, one of the biggest topics of the week has been NBA Top Shots. So brand new concept. And I'd really like to get your thoughts on it just because it has characteristics that sports cards have as well. Like there's some parallels there. But there's also some big differences. And, it's something that I'd never even heard of until I saw this a couple months ago. And my biggest concern was, will this be something that people value long-term? Because I could always look to cards and art and antique guns and collectibles, as I know people have liked this for hundreds of years or 100 plus years. Will people value this, or is this more of just a thing to get in early, flip it, and get the hell out? And I don't know the answer because it doesn't have that track record that cards and other things do. Do you have an opinion on NBA Top Shot?
I do have an opinion on it. I mean, it's not a completely, I wouldn't say I'm really in the know. I'm not. I don't know a ton about it. I have bought a pack on their website. I bought one pack on the website just to check it out. But my thoughts are that, I have nothing bad to say about it. I don't care that that it's an intangible asset, that you can only see it on your screen. I don't care that I can go on YouTube and watch highlights for free. That's not what this is. This is something different. What to me, Top Shot is, number one, is it's licensed by the NBA. I think there's huge value in that to this product. Number two, I can't tell you what the future is going to hold for these things. What I can tell you, though, is that the world's changing. New technologies, new products are being thought of, conceived by people, and they're making them real. And there's an audience for this. I've heard of these moments selling for $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. That's a lot of money. I think it's highly speculative, but I'm okay with it. I have nothing bad to say about it. I think that I don't know how long it's going to last. I can't see that far into the future. But if they manage it properly, if the user interface is one that's enjoyable, if there's some gamification aspects to it, I can see it being very successful, to the point where, you know, FOMO sets in. I'm a victim. I suffer from FOMO. I'm not going to pretend I don't, like a lot of people do. And you know, it's like, should I get in and buy this? I tried to buy a pack of a product they dropped last week, and I couldn't buy it. It sold out too fast. And I was kind of a little bit bummed about it. And then I find out that Chris, you know, Vegas Fine 777, he bought one, got a Luca moment. He paid $240 for the pack and sold it for over $20,000. So
wow.
If I would have got a pack, maybe I would have had that moment and sold it. But, you know, I just think that that we, I don't want to say as a hobby, but maybe we as a hobby, I like to be open-minded. I like to, you know, not be too judgmental and try to see the good in things. And, you know, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I think it's got legs, and I think it's got legs because it's licensed by the NBA. It's built on the blockchain, which, if you know how the blockchain works, it's pretty secure. It's pretty cool. More and more people are getting interested and involved in blockchain, whether it's Bitcoin or other currencies. So this is just a currency that has a basketball play behind it, I think. And I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by it because it's so new. And it's funny because, you know, I remember when I was in my 20s, I would like latch on just because it was new. I'd be like, this is it, you know. And now I feel like the old man that's like, I don't know, this is kind of sketchy. It's so intriguing because I just have never considered something like this for myself or heard about it before. And even crypto is something that I wish I was a bit more open-minded to years ago, which makes a lot of sense. And, you know, if PayPal starts accepting NBA Top Shot as a form of payment, then I'll know it's legit. But for now, I'm still like, okay, I see the excitement because it's new. There's money to be made. But I'm also reminded of soccer cards back in August, where it was like a mad dash to soccer cards and it just went up. But very few people actually cared about the players, knew who they were. You know, like they were. And I bought some of these cards recently because the prices dipped so low. But it was more just a land grab. It was, hey, here's this thing. Prices are going through the roof. Get in now. And I need more time to process NBA Top Shot to see if the excitement is going to be sustained over a year or 2 years, or if it's going to be like, that was new and shiny. Now what's next? Like, no one has lost money in it so far, or, you know, usually that happens at first, is everyone's making money until they don't. And I just need more time to tell, but very interesting. And I think that one thing is that you've been in the hobby for so long where a lot of the dynamics have been the same for a long period. And then in the last year, maybe a couple of years, you see new platforms emerging. You see technology really entering the space. What's a dynamic in the hobby that you think will change the hobby forever? Like over the last 40 years, you're like, this thing is really entering the market, and I think this is going to stay for the next 10, 20, 30 years.
So two things pop to mind. The first one is content. You know, your show, my show, Instagram as a community. I love all this stuff. I love all the content, the community, man, the community, right? Like just think about the next national when a bunch of us in your audience, all the guys in the chat, myself, my audience, the hobby gets together. It's going to be nuts. We all know each other now. Like, not we all, but a lot of us know each other, you know, or know who we are. And we're going to get to meet some people that watch our shows. I love the community. In my life is so fulfilled by virtue of this hobby and the friends I've made. Like Joe Perot, who's watching right now, I see him commenting. He's become a friend of mine. Like, we hang out offline. I've only met him through being in my audience, you know, but now he's a friend. We talk all the time. That's something I wouldn't have had without 2020. And I'm grateful for that. And for many people, that's one thing. The community is awesome. But, you know, we have the fractional ownership, that business model. I don't see that ever going away. I think that was a natural progression. I think the values that the escalation of values across the hobby in 2020 kind of set the table for that to be more viable, because who can, even a $50,000 PSA 9 Michael Jordan rookie, very few people can afford that, but anybody can afford to own a fraction of it for 10, 50, $100. So I think that's here to stay. Again, even though a lot of people don't like it because you can't hold the card, it's not for me. One thing I don't like in the hobby, Brad, is so many people project their opinions on the whole hobby. It's like, I don't like it, it's no good. Well, no, that's not a very fair comment. You don't like it, it's no good for you. Doesn't mean it doesn't have legs under it. Doesn't mean it's not a good business model. Doesn't mean other people won't accept it. Fractional ownership doesn't need us. It doesn't need the core hobby collectors. It'll survive without us. It'll survive with other sort of client classes, if you will. So I think fractional is here to stay. The community, I think all the content we're seeing is here to stay too. I don't plan on going anywhere when the pandemic is over. I don't think you do too. It's fun, right? We love doing our shows. It's a bit of a high we get from it. So those are a couple of things. And then maybe finally, one thing we have to caution ourselves towards is that the values are not just going to go up infinitely week after week, month after month. It's going to end up slowing down. And I'm not a doomsdayer at all, because I'm super bullish on the hobby and my collection and other people's collections. But just be ready to have to get through a time where you might see some red and not always black. But I would encourage you, based on my experience, don't feel like you got to just sell. It's not going to come crashing out from under us. One thing we learned, Brad, very important. One thing we learned in 2020 is that this hobby is more resilient than anything else, because pandemic hits. I thought, oh my gosh, I got to sell. My cards are going to go down to being worth nothing, and that was an extreme situation. I wouldn't sell just because the values come down 5-10%. But when you have a pandemic ahead of you, it's like, oh man, maybe I need to sell. No one's going to care about cards. I'm going to use these to heat up fire next year. So, but what happened? The exact opposite. The hobby thrived. It thrived. So to me, it's one of the safest sort of investments we have, but you have to be willing to ride out the ebbs and flows and don't get too scared. Don't get too, panicky when you see things come down a little bit, because as I've experienced over these cycles, in due course, they're going to exceed where they are right now. And after 2020, we have the best foundation in the hobby we've ever had. The floor is higher than it's ever been before. And I believe it's a permanent adjustment, because so many more people are in this now, and it's so much different than the 90s was. So people that compare the current situation to the boom of the early 90s and then the subsequent bust, it's apples and oranges. So I don't like that comparison.
Yeah, a lot of great points there. And I saw Eric join the chat, and he asked if I got his package. And yeah, I showed this off at the very beginning. This is me face planting in LA. What an awesome card you made. So thank you again, Eric. But that's a great testimony to the community, because, I mean, look, I tell everyone, I don't have any special cards that are super rare or super expensive that means so much to me. This is my favorite card right now. I'm like, holy crap, this guy Eric went out of his way to draw me and put me on a card. This is emotionally the best card I have right now. Like, that is the coolest, because that was from the community. I would rather have no cards and at least people to talk to about cards than have all the cards in the world but no one to share it with. Because especially in COVID, where I'm like, all right, I can't be around anyone. There's not much fun going on. There's a lot of darkness. There's a lot of like hate and turmoil and anger. I want, part of the escape is, hey, can I at least have a conversation that's positive, that's at least about something light? And so, the community is kind of like one of those hallmark answers, like, oh, it's the people, blah, blah, blah. But seriously, it is the community that gives us that high when we go live and we get to see all of our friends here in the chat. And I see all you guys' comments right here. In terms of the fractional ownership, I see that as a great thing. I like, some people are turned off by the institutional money buying up all these cards, but I see that as security. I see that as like, okay, if big time investors believe in it, it's not just flippers that hear about it from Gary V. Like I got in after hearing Gary V talk about it. I was like, sports cards are really this big again? But if it was only that, I'd feel a lot more worried. But if the big money investors are in buying these cards up for millions of dollars, I feel like, okay, this is what they do for a living on a very high scale. I feel better about the hobby overall that way. And so I think that's great. I forgot what other point you mentioned, but a lot of really good points there. I know the fractional ownership, I think, will just continue as prices go up. But let's talk about something that you see now that you don't have too much confidence in. If there is there something that you're not really sold on yet, or you're just not really liking the way it's presented?
The only thing that comes to mind, I'm sure there's more if I were to think about it, but we're seeing a lot of people come into the hobby right now for that quick flip, and I think that's all right. I have no issues with the way anyone approaches the hobby if it's what makes them happy, and they, if they're willing to kind of suck up the wins and the losses along the way. So, we're seeing a lot. I'm noticing it in hockey because I pay closest attention to hockey, and I'm seeing now just in content, people are looking for what player is going to be, what rookie this year is going to be good, and who should I invest in? I get these questions all the time, but I'm the wrong YouTuber to ask what rookies to invest in, because I don't speculate on rookies. It's just not my game. I don't think I'm good enough at it to make it worth my while. I would rather wait for a rookie to have a couple seasons under his belt, make sure that player is going to have a good long career, barring injury, of course, or something else, and then buy a copy of their card for my personal collection. So I rarely, if ever, will go load up on a player's cards, hoping to flip them, in the playoffs or later on in the season. I just don't have the bandwidth for that. So I see a lot of people doing that. And in hockey, it's tough. You can pick a rookie and load up on him. But, if it may be 3 years down the road where that player actually has that breakout season. Hockey players can take longer to develop than basketball players, for sure. Basketball players, you can come out of high school and kind of lead your team, right? We've seen it before, Kobe, LeBron. You don't see that in hockey so much, if ever. So I'm seeing so many short-term hold people in the hobby now, and I wish them all, and you may be one of them, Brad, I wish you and them all luck. I hope you make your profits. I really do. But I'm a long-term guy. I'm a collector at heart, and I think that as it's the collectors that really are the kind of build the foundation and make sure that the hobby is always going to be there and the values will always be there. So, but what I do think is that a lot of these investors, I call them even short-term flippers that are coming in, a lot of them I think are going to turn into collectors because they're going to get these cards in hand and realize how awesome they are and we love them. And so maybe some of them will actually convert to collectors and be a hybrid, right? Don't stop what you're doing. If you like that short-term game, do it. It's a part of the hobby. Star Stock is built for it. Go for it. Do it, right? But maybe try to, if you can, if it's kind of within your character, to build yourself a long-term personal collection portfolio as well, so you can kind of balance out the long-term and the short-term. Fill it with Hall of Famers, proven guys whose careers are over. They can't get hurt. They can't end up they probably won't end up in jail, all those sorts of things, right?
Yeah, never say never, but yeah.
But balance it. Back in the in the 2000s, I was opening up cases of product and losing my shirt every time. And I thought, what I did was, if I spent $1,000 on opening product and I got burned, I would force myself to go buy an investment piece for $1,000 to kind of balance that out and say, listen, I'm going to almost punish myself by forcing myself to go take that same amount of money and buy a card that's a better asset. And I would do that. And now those are, of course, some of my best holdings right now.
That brings up a learning lesson that I got years ago from a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, by Robert Kiyosaki. Yeah. There was one line in that book that changed my life. And he said this. He said, most people that want a Porsche go out there and buy a Porsche. But what wealthy people do is they buy an asset that will pay for the Porsche. So they will buy stocks or real estate or whatever that will pay the payment, the monthly payment of the Porsche. So now you have the thing that's bringing you money and the thing that you actually want. And I see a lot of that with sports cards, where it's like, look, if you want to break every single day, but you're running out of money, because it's hard to be lucky, more often. It's like, look, I could buy a lot of scratch off tickets, but odds are I'm not going to win more than I'm spending. So how do I continue breaking? How do I continue buying cards for my collection? Well, that means you got to offset it with either money from your job or your business, or you've got to invest in cards to be able to afford that. And my concern with that is so many people want to just enter breaks and get lucky, or just buy whatever flashy card. And I feel like that could be a very high turnover rate if it's not backed by anything sustainable. And the sustainable part is either you got disposable income because you're working your butt off at your job, you have money from your parents, you have whatever, so that you can afford this on an ongoing basis, or you're going to have to figure out, all right, I don't even like this person, but I know he's a good investment for 3 reasons, and I'll be able to sell this for a 50% profit in 3 months, and that will pay for my next break. And I think beyond that, it's just I think it's a strong life lesson, especially if you're a teenager or your 20s, where it's like, hey, this is just being responsible. It's saying, hey, I want these things. How can I achieve them without just relying on the credit card getting backed up?
Yeah,
so,
I mean, like like you said, entering into group breaks, going to the card shop and buying a case of cards and opening it yourself, even investing in the new flavor of the month rookie. That's all gambling. It's all gambling. But then you can separate yourself apart from the pack when it comes to investing in a rookie. If you're really following the sport, one of your buddy Andy from the Fantasy Football Card Quest. He's somebody that I think has an edge in the game when it comes to the short-term flip or the investing in football rookies, because the guy seems to live in. He was a guest on my show. We've hung out. He lives and breathes the sport, or so it seems to me. And if you do that, and you're a good, if you can scout, then it's less of a gamble to do that. But if you're entering into group breaks and you're busting wax, that's gambling, and that's okay. I did it for a long time. I almost stopped cold because I just realized that I was losing money. And at the end of the day, sure, it's a hobby, but it's not a hobby that I want to burn $3,000 a month on by cracking wax and coming out with $500 worth of stuff. And then it's a pain in the ass to move it even. Right. So, yeah. So, and I'm sorry for
oh, dude, cuss away, man. Cuss away. Let's do it. Right.
So, sorry, but just to wrap it up, that's kind of my point. There is the opportunity to gamble in this hobby. If that's your nature, if it is, go for it. Have fun. We need breakers. With no breakers, there's no singles on the secondary market for guys like me to come and scoop up. So we need that. But if you're going to gamble, I would say, if you want to balance out, you want to have longevity in the hobby. You don't want to get a sour taste in your mouth because you watch somebody's top 5 video and you followed them without being really having some scouting talents like Andy does and many others. You're going to have a bad taste in your mouth, and you're going to leave the hobby with nothing but bad things to say about it. So there's a strategy to avoid that. And that is balance it out, buy some quality pieces to go along with your fun money, if you will.
And I think the way I feel about that, it's so similar, but I'm like, look, I trust myself and my skill set and what I can learn more than the luck of the draw. And, and it's because I want to put in the work of not only the players, but I believe in this player, but what is the right time to buy this player? What are 3 reasons why I believe this player will go up in value or could go up in value in the next 6 months? Like, to me, wouldn't you rather have that skill than, look, whatever the YouTuber says, I'm just going to buy and I'm going to hope for the best. Whatever is in the pack, I'm going to hope for the best. If you are so good at being lucky, then more power to you. I would rather just be lucky and be like, look, every pack I open, it's always a serial numbered LeBron James or something like that. But I don't have that skill. I don't know how to be that lucky, but I do know, okay, if these are the players that performed the best last season, what is the most underrated player that is on the highest on the team that's supposed to go to the playoffs or the highest ranking? Let's say the Avalanche or the Lightning. That's exactly what I did with Braden Point last back in March. I bought a bunch of his cards, $15 to $20 raw, and $35 to $45 for his PSA 10. If you don't know hockey, this guy's a stud, but I sold those cards for about $170 to $220. I just sold my last one for, I think, $230, but it was just research. It was, hey, what can I do to give myself the competitive advantage? And I think a lot of people discount their own knowledge or their ability to figure out, like, hey, if I'm just going to put in a bit more work than everyone else, if I'm just going to be a bit more patient, that's a two huge advantages right there. I'm going to outweight people. I'm not going to panic sell. I'm not going to FOMO buy. I'm just going to be like, hey, you know what? This makes sense to me. I talked to a couple other friends that are pretty smart, that have rational thoughts and do this as well. I'm going to take a chance on my my predictions. And if it doesn't pan out, that's okay. I'll modify and I'll move on. But I think the lesson is, like, guys, it's not that hard if you actually put in the work to make investments that make sense. Just be a bit more patient, study a bit more, and then you can afford to do all the breaks you want. But I feel like people just count themselves out. Like, it's like, if I don't know the player based on, whatever the YouTuber says, then I have nothing. And it's like, dude, you have the internet. You have like so many things to look at. You have the prior sales. You have comparing other players. If you just learn how to do that, you'll be set. And I'm finding the hobby, I think, easier and easier, because I realize most people don't want to put in the work or don't want to wait. Like, I want to buy something today to flip tomorrow, rather than, what if you can almost have a guaranteed investment of buying today to flip in 6 months? All that means is that you just buy now, and then in 6 months you sell, and then you keep doing this over and over again, versus, yeah, but I want to turn my $10 into 150 in a week. I'm like, well, good luck. I don't know how to do that besides getting lucky.
Yeah, no. Well said. I'm reading some of the comments coming in. You've got like some really smart comments coming in here that I've just kind of all the way through here. But Al Lanistas made of you, like he said, it's a great thrill. Ripping product is fun, right? And I'm not saying never rip product. Like, ripping product it's fun. It's like but to me, it's a treat if I'm ever going to do it, and I have to be willing to lose the money, because I don't feel a treat like a piece of cake.
This is ripping. This is ripping right here. I'm gambling with my health, and it's expensive. Exactly. It's really expensive, but that's what it is.
BC said the gamblers are a big part of fueling the hobby. Yeah. I completely agree with that. They are. That's why I'm thankful we have so many successful group breakers and so many group break customers. Again, without those guys buying into that product, we wouldn't see as many cards enter the public space, get listed on eBay and elsewhere. The guys like me can go up and snag and pay for less than the cost of that guy paid for the break.
Yeah, and I want that person to get really lucky and to balance out. I think it's always about the balance. We need collectors. Without the investors, I don't think the hobby would be at its level without the investors. But the collectors are the core. Without the breakers, then it's more business than fun. We need the fun, because if we're doing this and it's like, well, this is as serious as stocks, but there's no fun talking about the gambling aspect or our favorite cards or our favorite players, then why are we in this?
I just want to, Michael K makes a commentary. I just want to, if I can just address it quickly. He says there's 3 types of card people: collectors, investors, and gamblers. The gamblers don't last very long. I completely agree with the last part, but the first part I don't agree with, because there's thousands of types of people in the hobby. We all fall along a spectrum. You've got collector here, you've got investor here. We're all somewhere in between. Very few people are purely collectors. Very few. There's more people, I believe, that are purely investors. They have no emotional value attached to their cards. But very few people are on either extreme end. We're all somewhere in the. I've got the collecting gene. I've collected my whole life, but I also invest. I invest I'm heavily invested into the hobby. So I'm not a collector or an investor, and I'm not, there's nothing wrong with Michael's comment. I'm just saying that we just have to kind of open it up a little bit and say we're all on the spectrum somewhere. We're all on within that collector investor dichotomy somewhere. And so there's more than just 3 types of people, but there's 3, maybe extremes, if you will.
Right. I totally agree. And I think also with this interesting time, you have people like myself that I was a collector as a kid, coming back for more of the investment side, because I loved the game of it. I love I love research. I love looking at it, and I love testing my theories. Like that's it. It's to me, this is chess. I don't know. I never learned how to play chess. This would be my game of chess. And when I win, then I could put more money into the hobby. I could buy a new webcam. I could buy a new microphone, and I could do this. And then the thrill to me is to be able to build the community and hopefully instill some of these financial lessons of life that I've learned from these greats to help them stay in the hobby and make enough investments so they can collect what they want so that the hobby can maintain its status. Like to me, that's winning all around. And I got to show this comment here. Cardboard Camp, thanks so much for the super chat. He says Jordan, LeBron, and Kobe rookies are still undervalued. If you have the Luka Silver Prism going for basically 10,000, it's crazy how that happens. It's crazy how the print runs of these newer guys are just through the roof. I think I saw like Zion's PSA 10 was like 15 or 16,000 on the last pop report. And I'm like, we think he's good. He has all this talent, but I mean, anything can happen in year 3. Like, like it happens. And yet we're kind of brushing over, look, LeBron James. Yeah. He's great, but he's towards the end of his, ridiculously impressive career. Jordan. Yeah. He's the greatest all time, but like, what are we going to do? But the newer guys just get so much love. And it goes back to what you were saying, how I think there's a lot more of a thrill factor with the rookies, the unknown. Like the unknown is exciting, but sometimes it's the known that is just proven, and it's the better investment that can allow us to have more fun with the unknown. Like I really liked what you said earlier when you quoted Rich Dad Poor Dad about find something that's going to pay for that Porsche, right? Mm-hmm. Buy and sell, use your skills to buy and sell cards, and then use that profit to kind of play as house money, buy into the breaks, do your gambling with house money, but use your hard-earned money from your day job to buy into actual assets, like good and Hall of Fame type pieces. I want to ask you too, because you talked about using the hobby as your game of chess. I want to know, do you love cards or do you love the game of buying and selling cards? I mean, look, when I look at cards, I think of my childhood, because when I was 10, 11, 12, this was it. Before video games, it was like Sega Genesis and sports cards. And it was never anything high end except for my Kobe Bryant rookie card that was that I got for $1, but it was worth $5. So to me, that was it. But the idea of connecting to my friends, to my childhood, and some cards look great. But I think for me, I don't need to have high-end cards. I don't need it. I love looking at 100 different Tom Brady cards and be like, dude, this is a $4 card, but man, I love this one. So it's less of a specific card thing. I will say my Kobe Bryant Crusade card, it's a 2012 one. It has like angel wings on the back. That's just how it's set. That was one of the first cards that I'm like, dude, I don't want to like go with this card because it hits me emotionally. Like there's only a few cards that hit me emotionally. The rest are more of just like, this is fun. I'm having a blast. I get to talk to Andy about all these different players and who he's hot on. But there's only a handful of cards so far that I'm like, this reminds me of my childhood, or it hits me emotionally for some reason.
But at least at least you do have cards where you love the card, because to me, otherwise you're not going to be here for very long if you don't actually love the cards. But I think you do, because you did it as a kid. Can we look at there's a comment that Craig C made at 8:47 where he talks about the market correction. I'd like to address that.
Yeah, sure. I guess you can't put the comments up, can you?
No, but at 8:47.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Different time zone. 7:47.
7:47 for you.
Yeah, dude. Thank you guys for being in the comment section. I wish we can get to all of them. All right. So Craig C, market correction.
Yeah, that one. So, he says, a market correction is a good thing, perhaps. I feel necessary for a healthy hobby. Thoughts? Do you mind if I provide my thoughts? Yeah. So I agree. I think that number one, it's inevitable. Number two, but a correction isn't a crash. A correction is just an adjustment. Maybe these gains kind of slow down and go up a little bit slower. Maybe the values overall come down a little bit. I have a card ladder account, and I've got like 98 cards that are kind of logged that are in their database. And every day I go through to see what the price change was on the ones that had a price change. And this morning I was going through and I saw like half a dozen cards went down in value, my immediate reaction was, oh, that's healthy. That's healthy. That's healthy. That's healthy. I was like happy to see it. They weren't monster drops, but maybe a card worth, I don't know, $600 came down by $40, or a card worth $2,800 came down by $250. That to me is healthy, right? Because price comes down, demand goes up, more people buy, more people want, and it'll continue to go up that way. So I agree with what Craig says, that yes, but a correction, I don't think a crash is healthy. I think a crash is going to scare away a lot of people. They're going to flood the market with all these 15,000 Zions they've been buying, which, by the way, I'm in the minority. I don't think 15,000 is a big population for a PSA 10. You can fit over 20,000 people into one basketball game in one city. I got to think everybody in that arena would be happy to own a Luka rookie or a Zion rookie, right? You spread that around the world. I live in Calgary, Alberta, I'm north of Montana. I own a Luka Prism-based rookie. I'm one guy. There, 15,000 to me, I just don't think it's as big a number as everybody thinks. Once this hobby truly goes mainstream, and I think it will. I think we're on our way. We're seeing it, more and more celebrities getting into the hobby now, like way more and more. Marcus Lemonis from CNBC's The Prophet just partnered up with Investacard.
Right, yeah.
Marcus, I don't know about you, Brad.
I saw Marcus Lemonis. Yeah, I saw him in Chicago, standing outside of a hotel.
He's like, I don't idolize anybody really, but Marcus, if I could choose one person to have dinner with, it would probably be Marcus, because I love his approach to business. And this guy's in the hobby now. He's no dummy. Marcus is no dummy, and he's in the hobby now. I think the hobby's going to go mainstream. And so, I mean, yeah, I just, I don't see a crash coming anytime soon. But I definitely can see a correction and some fluctuations.
Yeah, and in terms of a correction, I see that as more of like a reality check, and it's just kind of like a slap. It's not like you're getting your ass kicked. It's just kind of like, yo, it's not healthy when it's like back in July, August. Prices appeared to double every 2 weeks. It was like, okay, it's inevitable, right? Because there's a point where you can't double over and over again and say like, all right, wait, this card's the same price as this house. I think I'd rather have the house. So there's a point where people go, all right, this is ridiculous. It can't sustain itself. And I think some people get out earlier. I'm more of the conservative side that's like, holy crap, it doubled in price. This is ridiculous. Let me get out. But it could still double more and more. But we saw that in August. I think that was the reality check for a lot of people in that first wave of get in, flip, money's all there. And I think that's natural and it's inevitable. But the crash is disastrous because that would hurt the hobby, that would hurt us, it would hurt everyone involved. I think that's the thing that, what's that?
Sorry, dude, but we would recover even a crash because collectors aren't going. I'm not going anywhere, right? Like if my Mickey Mantle rookie or my Bobby Orr rookie comes down to half of its value that it's at today, I'm still going to be in the money because I bought them a long time ago, and they're not for sale. Like I'm going to hold them till I pretty much till I die, or maybe my twilight years, I'll do the card show circuit and sell them off. But I mean, yeah, I mean, the hobby's gone through crashes before. I would imagine in 100 years,
like, so it's always there. I think that's the security versus some of the new stuff, like the NBA Top Shot, which I hope it succeeds because I think that'll help the whole hobby. But that's where I'm like, all right, it hasn't seen a crash. It hasn't seen that kind of stuff. So I feel like the longevity of the hobby is like pretty much the security blanket.
It's fine, man. And we learned during COVID and the pandemic that the hobby's resilient. It'll thrive under the worst of circumstances. Jason Larson wanted to know what Marcus's last name was. It's Lemonis, like Lemon IS. But I see another comment, if you don't mind me speaking to it. It's at 7:51 your time. Gabriel De Giovanni. He says, "What are my thoughts on the recent '90s hockey boom, like the O-Pee-Chee, the Jagger?" The Jaromir Jagr 90 O-Pee-Chee Premier keeps going up. I do have what I think is a unique take on what's going on with some of these what were lower value cards, especially, and I guess it is kind of secluded almost to the junk wax era because you have all these Hall of Famers in those early 90s years that are not worth anything because no one cares. No one will even pay the shipping on these cards raw. So my take is that because grading has gotten so expensive now, to grade a card that in a 10 is worth $500, but in a 9 is worth $80, it's not worth the cost of grading risk to grade those cards. Because if you don't get a 10, and 10s are still tough to get in general, right?
Yeah.
If you don't get a 10, you're going to probably lose money or at best break even. So now what's happening though is people don't want to take that risk as much. Number one, prices are going up because they won't even take bulk submissions anymore. And number two, the wait time is so long. Who knows where those cards will be and when you get your card back in 9 to 12 months. So I think what's happening is that people who are really savvy are saying, hey, wait a second. Some of these cheaper cards that were graded before the backlog started actually have some new inherent value in them, because those populations are pretty much going to be stagnant. Not completely stagnant, but more stagnant than they otherwise would have been when you could have done bulk submissions and had cards graded for $12 or $13. You can't do that anymore. So that's kind of my hot take, if you will, is that I'm not surprised by it, to Gabriel's comment. I love it. Those players deserve the love that they're getting, but I think it's more a function of the overall trend of the hobby, which is partially driven by what's going on in the world of grading. And that's why some of these lower value cards, the PSA 10s that were 30, 40, $50 a year ago are now 150 to 200. It's because no one wants to take the risk to grade them and get a 9 and you lose money. So you're better off just buying one of the 10s that are out there, but it's finite. And those populations, I do not think are going to grow as much as the Zions and the Lucas and those guys, where the payoff for the PSA 10 is, worth the risk of the cost of grading.
Right. And I just sent in another submission to PSA. Like right now I have, I think, 500 cards sitting in PSA that hopefully by this time next year, maybe I have you on, this time next year and be like, hey, I just got the cards back. And I was wondering if you thought, because of the delays with grading, if that would keep the hobby not hotter, like not without the correction, but like, I feel like if it takes that long to grade, it's almost like a perk for keeping the hobby hot in a sense. It's kind of like, it's got to be hot because a lot of these cards haven't hit us yet. And, obviously there's like a nervousness if you're like, hey, look, I paid a lot of money for these cards. I paid a lot of money to get them graded, and I'm not going to see them for a year. I hope the hobby's going to be just as strong, if not stronger. I wonder, like, if you have a thought around the longevity of, or how long it takes to get graded cards back affecting the overall health or just the momentum of the hobby.
I think there's a correlation there, Brad. I think something we have to be aware of too. We've heard about these backlogs at BGS. I think PSA is doing a better, and I don't know for sure. I think PSA is doing a better job at actually getting through the cards that are sitting there waiting to be graded. I think they've been able to hire more people, increase their square footage and that sort of thing. But I have a bit of concern what's going to happen when all these millions of cards that are in backlog actually release into the market, because the populations that we're seeing, I believe, are understated based on what's going to, based on had the grading companies been able to turn these things around in their stated turnaround times, this million card backlog would be out in the market right now. And there wouldn't be 15,000 Lucas, there'd be 18,000 Lucas, whatever that number is, and across the board. So I think in the next year, we're going to see populations increase, but I do believe that the hobby is growing enough and becoming mainstream enough that there's enough new interest and new collectors, new investors that are willing to consume those higher those higher populations and the additional the backlog that's about to get unleashed into the hobby over the next year or so. It'll be trickled out, right? So I think it's all related as I see it.
Yeah, and I wanted to address this question by Eric in a second about I'll bring it up in a second, but Ray-Ban puts, as long as sports are around, sports cards will be relevant. And I think one of the biggest joys is talking about sports so much. Like, I love talking about sports, especially during this time where it's like, oh, like, what do you think of this player? I'm following teams I normally wouldn't, just like fantasy footballers follow players and teams and root for these players, even though they're on other teams, because they're getting their fun, even if their team sucks. Like if their team is 1-15 or in hockey, they're 0-3 or whatever. And it's like, man, we're struggling, but at least I have interest in this player on this other team. I think that's what brings in a lot of excitement with the Cards, is like, hey, I'm rooting for this guy for a couple different reasons. I did the research. I think this is the guy that will have a great season. And just like, you get into fantasy football for the same reason. And the reason I didn't is because I'm like, well, this is really time consuming. I don't have all this time. And if I get in, I'm going to go all in. And I was like, all right, fantasy, I'm nervous that it would take too much of my time if I want to do it right. But with Cards, it's a lot more long-term and a lot more fun in that sense. So,
well, let me jump in on Ray-Ban's comment, because I agree 100% with what he's saying. I agree 100% with what you're saying. The one thing I'll add that neither of you have said yet is that, and I put this on Instagram a couple of weeks ago, cards make sports better,
Yeah.
But that's one thing. Another thing is that cards give us an opportunity to feel like we have a stake in the game, right? Over and above being a fan of your local team or your favorite player, now it's almost like we own the player. The only people that own players are the owners of the teams, and they don't even own the player. They just have a contract for services, right? No one owns anybody. But it gives us that feeling of ownership. We really, and to me, it's like Ray-Ban said, and I think that's kind of where that his comment kind of goes to, when if you think it through a little bit more and you push that discussion, you get to the point where cards let us own that player. They give us a stake in their success. Wayne Gretzky, Michael Jordan, Joe Montana, Tom Brady, right? All these guys, Derek Jeter, like you own their card, you have a piece of them. You own their rookie card, you have a piece of them when they were young.
Yeah, we're tied to that player and that person. So now it's like, you did that awesome commercial campaign, and maybe like people find out how funny you are. But like I told you, I think when you were going live with Andy, I said, what's so unique with social media now is now we get to see so much of who the person is versus just a player. So now it's like, hey, I really like this person. I really like the humor, or I really like the insight that this person has. There's one question here I wanted to bring up by Eric, though, real quick, which is he's afraid that the hobby is going to hurt in 20 years because younger kids can't buy cards, which, it definitely hits home, because I think to myself, what would I have done when I was 10 or 11 years old and I couldn't afford any of these cards? And it was just like this adult thing. Like maybe if my dad was into it and I saw how excited he was, that would be different. But what's your take on just the prices getting so far away that 10, 12-year-olds can't afford to get in?
There are cards at every price for every income class. That to me is not an issue. But what happens then is that the kids, they buy the entry-level products for a couple bucks a pack. If you can, I know it's changed now with boxes of Prism going for $2,000 and that. So I may be off base there, but in hockey, at least you can buy MVP, you can buy OPC, you can buy the cheaper products for a couple bucks a pack. That's no problem. And then you're getting a taste for it. But then you start looking on the internet, you start going to card shows, and now you see the cards you really are actually going to covet down the road because they're way nicer, way cooler, and way more valuable. Well, hey, that's motivating for kids to find a way to make money, to find a hustle, find a side hustle, go to school, get a career, make some money. I'm not so concerned with getting kids into the hobby between the ages of, say, 5 and 12, even 5 and 15. I'm not so worried about those kids. I think what my concern about those kids is that, I give away cards on Halloween. You come to my house on Halloween, you get chocolate bars, but you also get a team bag with 10 base cards in it. I've been known as the hockey card house since like 2004. So nice. That's one of my ways of giving back, but it's also a way to give to some cards, some kids. But again, I don't think that the 5 to 15-year-old is the future of the hobby. I think that it's the 15 to 25-year-old that's the future of the hobby right now, because these are the guys that are buying cards now. Somehow, I don't know how it is, but I see a lot of kids with enough money to buy some nice cards, and they're flipping and they're making money. There's some real sharp young entrepreneurs in our hobby right now, and they're killing it. So I think number one, it teaches you business. It teaches you negotiation skills. It teaches you social skills. It teaches you business skills. It teaches you economics, finance, all of these things. The hobby provides you culture. Like there's so many different, but negotiating. And, I deal with 14, 15-year-olds all the time. And I treat them like they're my age. And I think that's good for them because it's going to help them develop their skills to use later in life in things outside the hobby. My point is that I'm not so concerned with the kid right now, other than to, especially underprivileged and that sort of thing. I want them to get cards for free and have fun and not be excluded from the hobby. But there's enough young people in the hobby now that are in their like late teens and their 20s who are going to be around for a while, I think. So, it's like today's kid is that 15 to 25-year-old, not that 5 to 15-year-old anymore. So I know it's probably, I don't know a lot of people share this take with me, but it's mine. I'll stick to it.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth to it, because at that price point, and also with all the content that's out there, all the ways, when you say like you can make money doing this, I'm like, this is a dream come true. You're kidding me. Like as a kid, the dream job, and it was kind of a joke, was being a roller coaster tester. You're the one that tests the roller coasters to make sure they're extra fun. And it's like, you're telling me that I can study sports. I could talk to people about my childhood hobby, something that I loved when I was 12 years old, and make money doing it. I think it's going to inspire a lot of preteens and teens to get into the hobby and learn the fundamentals and the life lessons in this hobby. If you look for them and you apply them, and if you're in long enough, because everyone fails. Everyone has like flops. Everyone gets a bad break. Everyone's like, okay, what is the lesson from it? Man, like knowing what the hobby is now and being able to do it for a year or two at 15 to 17 years old. I mean, I feel like I'd be way further ahead, because there's so much great content out there. There's so much to learn in terms of, okay, this is what hype is, and this is merit, this is hype, this is how our emotions play into things, this is fear of missing out, this is what's a better value, and things you can apply to cars and houses and jobs and so many different things, where I go, oh my God, if I could learn all this now at a young age, even if I didn't have much money to put in, like it would just propel my life in so many ways, because it's just a microcosm of life in just all these lessons I wish I'd learned back then, that it took me until my mid to late 20s to figure out. So I think there's validity to it in terms of that the really young kid can't go to Kmart and get a $5 pack with allowance. So there is that. Hopefully there'll be more charities involved. I think there's certain content creators and different organizations doing more for kids with card related stuff. I think that's phenomenal. But in terms of who is in now, who's that next generation, I totally agree. Where if you're 13 or 14 years old or above, you could really start making a little side money doing this, but also learning a ton about life at the same time. So
that last thing you said, Brad, that's the key for me. I mean, I remember being 13, 14, 15 years old. The kids today are so far ahead of where we were when I was that age in terms of their ability to interact and negotiate with adults. Like there's some tough negotiators out there that are 13, 14, 15 years old. And I attribute their skills and their confidence and the way they carry themselves to their experience transacting in our hobby at card show, online, wherever.
Yeah. And I'm waiting for a 13-year-old to have a booming YouTube station and be like, oh my God, this kid is going to inspire 10,000 other 13-year-olds to get into the hobby and just show the possibilities. I think that's one of the coolest things, that if you're 13 or 14 or whatever now, the world is your oyster. I mean, you have there's kids that are like 12 years old. Like the number one YouTuber is that kid Ryan's World, made $26 million, his station. He opens toys. Now, some people get pissed at that. And I'm like, dude, that is inspiring. Like if he can do that and make more than the athletes of the cards we collect at 9 years old, opening toys, then I could probably make a full-time living making content and talking about sports and teaching, financial principles, things that I'm passionate about. Like, to me, that's inspiring. So, I think there's always that glass half full, glass half empty approach. And I just always want to be like, might as well go with glass half full. There's money in it, which means there's going to be opportunities for collectors, investors, kids, adults. It just might not be the same as it was before.
Agree. Yeah, agree, man.
Well, it's been an hour 10 and we haven't even touched your story. And man, it's a really good story with all the people you've connected with over the last 40 years, but especially some of these representatives of the big companies. Is there a favorite story that you have in the hobby? Just something that you'd love to share with people that maybe they're newer to the hobby or just they haven't seen that side of it yet?
Well, I mean, one of my favorite stories is a personal story. In 2009, I was I challenged Upper Deck in 2009 because I was getting fed up with all the fake patches on the RPAs that were out there, and I had built an archive of the Cup hockey RPAs, and I kind of became a little bit known for that among some hockey collectors. And I put out on a message board to Upper Deck. I said, hey, if you won't photograph these and keep an archive of them, I said, I'll come to your facility on my own time and my own dime, and I'll photograph these cards for you. Well, lo and behold, I get a message from Upper Deck saying, hey, you're welcome to come. We'll have you out there. I knew some of the guys from Upper Deck already by that point, so I wasn't a complete stranger to them. And I went to I went to the pack out in their facility in North Carolina, and I photographed 28,000 patch cards from Upper Deck's the 2008-9 the Cup set, which has Steven Stamkos' RPA from your Tampa Bay Lightning in it. So that was a thrill as a kid who grew up collecting cards, thinking what a dream job it would be to go work at Upper Deck or go work at Beckett or one of those things. I thought that would be awesome. Here I am at the Upper Deck facility, helping out at the pack out of their premier product. That was like a hobby career thrill for me, for sure. Another thrill I had was when I had my 30th episode of my show, my guest was Dr. Beckett from Beckett Magazine and Beckett Grading at the time. And that was kind of like, man, this is a guy whose magazines, I was buying them from issue number 1. I couldn't wait for every issue every month. Beckett was just the name of them. I didn't know it was a guy back in those days, So the fact that now he's actually he's guested on my show on 3 separate occasions, and we have a rapport. We email. He's a friend of mine now. Like, that's kind of a hobby thrill for a guy like me who grew up, whose whole life I've been in the hobby. So that was a thrill. My one of my best guests of all time is Brian Gray, who owns Leaf Trading Cards. He's just an awesome personality. He's a glass half full guy. He's bullish on the hobby, just like I am. But I've had the VP of grading at Beckett. I've interviewed people from SG or CSG, the new grading company. I've had Tim Getch, who's the founder of ComC.
He's my favorite platform.
Yeah, I love ComC. I've been on it for a long time. People from I've had two guys on from Panini, several from Upper Deck. The list goes on. Star Stock, Collectible, people that have bought big cards, people that have sold big cards. I've got a few pretty high profile guests lined up over the next 4 or 5 weeks. So I would, invite your audience to check out my YouTube channel, give me a subscribe, and come see what my show's all about. And I will mention, I do watch your show, Brad. I enjoy it. I like your show. I like your vibe. You got a great audience. I love the interaction you get. So I invite them all to come see what I'm all about too.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know if there's anyone in the hobby that has their finger on the pulse of the hobby more than Jeremy, just because of your personal experience and then the experience of those that you interview. Because I'm like, the thought that always comes across is like, what can I extract from you? Because there's so much value there of real life, but also from your guests. And I feel like I got to ask one more time, is there something that maybe a guest has shared or something that you just feel like,
oh man,
I always feel like what's in that brain right there? What's in that brain that I could use and everyone here could use to at least understand the hobby more or enjoy their time a bit more?
Watch my episodes with Brian Gray. He's been on with me on 3 occasions, and the guy has you've been very flattering towards me tonight with my experience. Brian Gray is, we've been in the hobby the same amount of time, but he's done everything in the hobby, and his insights are what I kind of look to when I'm kind of not sure on something. I'll look to him for some of it. I had Ken Golden from Golden Auctions on my show shortly after he sold the Mike. He sold the Mike Trout on a Thursday. He was my guest on the Saturday in August after.
Wow.
I mean, he's another guy who's got insights, been in the hobby since the early 80s, late 70s even. Nothing comes to mind specifically, Brad, but if you watch my shows, and they're long, like your live streams, they're longer even, but we get into some really good content, some really interesting topics. And I'm very proud of the guests I've had. Like it's the who's who of who's in the hobby. And so I've been fortunate to be able to attract them. When I started my show back in April, I thought to myself, I got to come out with a bang. I got to start with a bang. So Carvin Chung, who invented Exquisite, and the Cup, who worked at Upper Deck and Panini, now he's at GTS Distribution. We've been friends. Well, when I went to the Upper Deck pack out that year, it was him that kind of hosted me. And to save money, we actually shared a hotel room, and we got to know each other over the 5 days that we were together at the pack out facility. And then we spent 4 or 5 days together at the facility. I'm taking pictures of cards, and these guys are hand packing the product. When I was done taking pictures, I hand packed several packs of the product as well, which was a thrill too. But I started the show, and I thought I got to start with a bang. I started with Carvin, and he's got tons of insights. He was just on my show last week again, which I've got tomorrow's my 76th episode of my main show, Sports Cards Live. I do a late night Saturday show called After Hours, where it's more chill with a guest. And so I've got about 20 something of those now. So I've had 100 episodes, and the guests have all been phenomenal, pretty much every single one of them. So there's lots to choose from.
Yeah. And I mean, there's one thing that I got to say is that, if you've been in this hobby for a week or several years, I always recommend you listen to different people, broaden your horizons, always see what, this person has to say, and then cross-reference it with this, and then find your own truth, right? Find what resonates with you and what doesn't. But you have to be open-minded to a lot of different perspectives. And I mean, that's what your show is. And you not only just a lot of different perspectives, but people that have been in the hobby and behind the scenes. I think that's something that that's unique about your show, and the connections you've made from bringing value to the hobby from what you did with Upper Deck years and years ago, which is pretty much offering, how can I help people in the hobby and the hobby itself? And then it opened up a lot of doors for you. But when you have those kind of people on, that's the kind of stuff that we don't see too much of in the content creation space, because usually it's just, here, I'm on this side of the hobby, I have the cards here, and now what? But you actually have a lot of insight with the guys that are producing the cards and are working out everything behind the scenes. So guys, I really appreciate you all joining us tonight. Make sure to check out Jeremy's channel, Sports Card Live. Sports Card Live. I'm sure if you just do the @ symbol and then Sports Cards, it'll pop up there on YouTube.
Can I make one more comment, Brad? Sorry, before we sign off, I just want, because one quick last comment, man. You mentioned that, whether you've been in the hobby for a week, a year, a month, whatever, find what resonates with you. I just want to mention, I have been in the hobby literally for 40 years, but I'm not one of these people who thinks I'm any better than anybody else, or I look down on new people in the hobby. I look up to new people in the hobby. I want to know how you approach. If you're new in the hobby, I want to know what brought you in. What do you like about the hobby? You'll help me see something that I might not otherwise see, because I don't want to say I'm set in my ways, because I try to be open-minded to everything. But I welcome everybody in the hobby except fraudsters. We don't need any scammers or fraudsters in the hobby, but I welcome everybody else. I with open arms, and I want to know you. We are in this thing together, and I can't wait to meet you, your audience, and anyone who's been in the hobby from a day to 50 years at the next national, where we can all congregate and bump fists and enjoy it together.
For sure. And I think there's that old saying where you can learn something from everyone, or everyone has something to teach you. And that's why, even if you're a 16-year-old kid, you have a perspective that I don't, but I still want to tap into that perspective because there's still a value there. Same as you and all your guests as well, where I'm like, okay, now I can shift lenses, but I know that there's a lot of value here as well. But I always want people to be open-minded and come up with their own conclusions, but always keep searching. So guys, thanks so much for joining us. I got a giant slice of cake to eat. We're going to have Jeremy slice as well right here, but make sure to check out his station for weekly content and wonderful interviews, Sports Cards Live. I'll link it up in the show notes, but you guys know where it is here on YouTube. So Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks everybody in the chat. Had a lot of fun.
See you guys next time.